The emergency session had been going on for 6 hours straight. Representatives from 47 different species filled the massive chamber on the Coalition station, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sounds, lights, and chemical signals that the translation system struggled to keep up with. Admiral Kessitar of the Thylorian Empire stood at the center podium, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's lights into rainbow patterns across the walls. His voice resonated with the deep musical quality of his people. The threat is confirmed. The Void Devourers have returned from dark space. Our scout ships tracked them emerging from the stellar nursery in Sector 7. Early projections show their fleet numbers in the thousands. A wave of anxiety swept through the chamber. The Void Devourers were legendary, the nightmare that older species used to frighten their young. 3,000 years ago, they had appeared without warning and consumed entire star systems, planets stripped to their cores, stars drained of energy, civilizations erased so completely that only fragments of their existence remained in ancient databases. Then, just as mysteriously as they appeared, they vanished. Some believed they had been defeated by a coalition of ancient species. Others thought they simply moved on to another galaxy. A few theorists suggested they went dormant, waiting for the galaxy to repopulate before returning for another harvest. Now everyone knew the truth. They had been waiting. How long do we have? The question came from High Coordinator Vess of the Zephyrian Collective. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered nervously across her translucent skin. Kessitar's form dimmed slightly, the Thalorian equivalent of a grim expression. 6 months until they reach the outer colonies, 1 year before they arrive at the core worlds. Maybe less if they travel faster than our projections. Then we have no choice, rumbled Constructor Prime, the representative of the architects. His massive silicon-based body shifted, causing the floor to tremble slightly. We must assemble the largest defensive fleet in Coalition history. The chamber erupted into discussion. Species began volunteering their military assets immediately. The Thylorians promised 200 of their legendary crystal battleships, each one grown over decades and capable of channeling stellar energy into devastating beam weapons. The Zephyrian Collective committed 5,000 bioships, living vessels that could regenerate damage and adapt their weapons mid-battle. The architects offered something even more impressive. We will mobilize 3 of our fortress worlds, Constructor Prime announced. Mobile planets equipped with gravitational weapons and self-sustaining populations. Each one can serve as a base of operations for entire battle groups. More pledges followed. The insectoid Klaxians would send their hive ships. The energy-based lumens promised to manifest warrior forms by the millions. The aquatic deepborn would deploy their pressure dome vessels, which could create artificial gravity wells to trap enemy ships. By the time the pledges finished, the Coalition had committed nearly 8,000 capital ships, countless support vessels, and enough fighters and drones to blot out stars. It was the largest military force ever assembled in the galaxy's recorded history. Then attention turned to Earth's representative. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat quietly in the human delegation section, a simple woman in a plain gray suit. Humans had only joined the Coalition 30 years ago, making them the newest and least experienced members. Their territory consisted of 1 star system and a handful of colony outposts. Their military was considered quaint by galactic standards, primitive chemical rockets and crude energy weapons that other species had abandoned millennia ago. Ambassador Chen, Kessitar said, his tone polite but clearly expecting little. What contribution can Earth offer to the defense fleet? Sarah stood slowly, her small form almost comically tiny compared to the massive aliens surrounding her. She walked to the podium with unhurried steps, placed her hands on the speaking surface, and looked directly at Kessitar. We're sending 1 ship. Silence fell over the chamber. Then someone laughed. It started with the Klaxian representative, a chittering sound that his species made when encountering something absurd. Others joined in quickly. The Zephyrian's bioluminescence flashed in patterns of amusement. Even Constructor Prime's form vibrated with what might have been laughter. Kessitar held up a crystalline hand for quiet, though his own form still shimmered with barely contained mirth. Ambassador Chen, perhaps you misunderstood the question. We're asking about Earth's full military contribution, all available vessels. I understood perfectly, Sarah replied, her voice calm. Earth is sending 1 ship to join the defense fleet. The laughter returned louder this time. High Coordinator Vess leaned forward, her tone sympathetic but patronizing. Ambassador, this is not a symbolic gesture we're discussing. The Void Devourers will destroy everything in their path. We need every vessel that can fly and fight. Surely Earth can spare more than a single ship. One ship is what we're sending, Sarah repeated. Kessitar's patience was clearly wearing thin. His crystalline form darkened to a deep red. Ambassador Chen, I don't think you grasp the scale of what we're facing. The Void Devourers consumed the progenitor civilization, the Builders, the First Federation. These were empires that spanned hundreds of systems. Your entire species lives in one star system. One ship will make no difference whatsoever. Nevertheless, that's our contribution. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted across the space. Some demanded that Earth be removed from the coalition for refusing to take the threat seriously. Others suggested that humanity was simply too primitive to understand what was being asked of them. A delegate from the Klaxian hives clicked angrily. Perhaps the humans think this is some sort of negotiation. Are they holding back forces to demand concessions? No, Sarah said quietly, though her voice carried through the translation systems to every corner of the chamber. We're not negotiating. We're not holding anything back. Earth is sending one ship because that's what we believe is needed. One ship against thousands of Void Devourers? Kessitar's voice dripped with scorn now. Tell me, Ambassador, is this ship some sort of super weapon? Does it fire planets at enemies? Does it collapse stars? It's a ship, Sarah replied simply. A very good ship. This is ridiculous, Vess declared. The human contribution is rejected. If Earth cannot or will not send meaningful forces, then they will not participate in the battle planning. We cannot waste resources protecting a single symbolic vessel. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Several species began transmitting new fleet positions that specifically excluded human space from the defensive perimeter. Sarah gathered her materials calmly, placing data tablets into her carrying case. Before leaving the podium, she looked up at the assembled representatives one final time. We'll be at the Kepler Nexus with the rest of the fleet when the time comes. I hope you'll reconsider your assessment when you see what we're bringing. She walked out of the chamber, her footsteps barely audible over the renewed discussions that erupted as soon as she left. Behind her, the coalition representatives continued planning their defense, writing off Earth's contribution entirely. In the Thylorian section, Kessitar turned to his military advisor. Make a note in the battle plans. The humans are sending one ship. Place it in the rear support line with the medical vessels and supply transports. At least there it won't get in the way when the real fighting starts. The advisor's crystalline form flickered with amusement. Should we include it in the tactical projections? No point, Kestar replied. One human ship won't make any measurable difference to the outcome. Let them have their symbolic participation. When this is over, assuming we survive, perhaps they'll learn to take galactic threats more seriously. Outside the station, Sarah Chen entered her transport vessel and opened a secure communication channel to Earth. How did they respond? Asked the voice on the other end. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Exactly as expected. They think we're fools. Good. That gives us 6 months to finish the preparations without unwanted attention. Is the Perseverance on schedule? According to the last report, yes. The final integration tests are happening now. Perfect. Let them laugh while they can, Ambassador. They'll understand soon enough why we only needed to send one ship. The communication ended, and Sarah's transport jumped to faster-than-light speed heading back toward Earth. Behind her, the Coalition continued assembling their thousands of vessels, confident in their numbers and dismissive of humanity's strange decision. None of them knew what was being built in Earth's orbital shipyards. None of them could imagine what humanity had accomplished in just 30 years of studying alien technology, and none of them understood that humans had a very different definition of what was possible. The countdown to the Void Devourer's arrival had begun. 6 months until the battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. 6 months until the Coalition learned why humanity sent only one ship. 6 months until they saw it. The news spread through the Coalition networks like wildfire. Within hours of the emergency session ending, every species with access to communication technology knew about humanity's response to the Void Devourer threat. One ship. Just one single ship. The reactions ranged from bewilderment to outright mockery. On the Thylorian homeworld, military academies used Earth's decision as a teaching example of what not to do in crisis situations. Young crystalline officers analyzed the human response in tactical classes, with instructors pointing out how gross miscalculation of enemy strength led to inadequate force deployment. One popular instructor began his lecture by saying, "Let us examine how a species can completely fail to understand basic military mathematics." The Zephyrian collective's hive minds discussed the human decision across their neural networks. Their consensus labeled it as either profound stupidity or some form of cultural death wish. Some Zephyrian philosophers even suggested that humans might have a completely alien understanding of numbers, perhaps believing that one meant something different than other species understood it. The entertainment networks had a field day. Comedy programs featured sketches about the mighty human armada, consisting of a single rusty shuttle held together with tape and optimism. Political commentators debated whether humanity should be expelled from the coalition for not taking the threat seriously. One particularly viral video showed an animated human ship with a scared face painted on it, fleeing from Void Devourer vessels while sad music played. In the halls of military command centers across the galaxy, the human decision became a running joke. "Should we send the whole fleet, sir?" an officer might ask. "No, just send one ship. We're feeling like humans today," would come the sarcastic reply, followed by laughter. But beneath the mockery, there was genuine concern in some quarters. Admiral Kessitar sat in his private chambers on the Coalition flagship, reviewing casualty projections for the upcoming battle. His military advisors had run the simulations thousands of times. Even with the massive fleet being assembled, they were looking at potential losses of 30 to 40%. The Void Devourers were not just powerful, they were adaptive. Ancient records showed that they learned from each engagement, evolving their tactics and technology mid-battle. "The humans will be massacred," his chief tactical officer said quietly. "Their single ship won't last 5 minutes once the Void Devourers arrive." Kessitar's crystalline form pulsed with deep blue light, indicating troubled thoughts. "I know. I've been considering whether we should refuse their participation entirely. It would be a mercy in a way. Let them stay in their system and hope the Void Devourers don't bother with such a small target. You think they'd accept that?" "No." Kessitar shifted his massive form, light refracting through his body in complex patterns. Ambassador Chen was adamant. "They're coming whether we want them there or not." "Then they're fools." "Perhaps." Kessitar pulled up the human file on his display. "But something bothers me about this. Humans may be new to the coalition, but they're not stupid. They've made remarkable progress in just 30 years. Their scientists have published papers that challenged some of our assumptions about physics. Their engineers have found novel solutions to problems we considered solved millennia ago. So why send one ship? That's what I can't figure out." Kessitar zoomed in on Earth's star system. "And there's something else. Our monitoring stations near human space have been detecting unusual energy readings for the past 6 months. Massive power spikes from their orbital facilities. When we asked about it, they said it was classified." The tactical officer's form brightened with curiosity. "You think they're building something?" "Obviously, but what? And why the secrecy?" They both stared at the display in silence for a long moment. Finally, the tactical officer spoke again. "Sir, should we send observers? We have the right under coalition security protocols to inspect member militaries during a crisis." Kessitar considered it, then slowly darkened his form in negation. "No, if they want to keep secrets, let them. We have bigger concerns than bruised pride over one insignificant ship." While the coalition fleets assembled at various staging points throughout the galaxy, activity around Earth reached a fever pitch. Orbital shipyards that normally operated with skeleton crews now hummed with round-the-clock activity. Transports ferried materials and personnel up from the surface in an endless stream. Power consumption in Earth's solar system had increased by 300%. The coalition monitoring stations dutifully recorded all of this, filing reports that went largely unread by commanders focused on their own fleet preparations. Meanwhile, the Void Devourers continued their advance. Automated probes sent by coalition scouts returned terrifying data. The enemy fleet was even larger than initial estimates suggested. Thousands of geometric ships, each one a perfect mathematical form that seemed to hurt the eye when viewed directly. They moved through space in precise formations, their hulls absorbing all light that touched them. Early skirmishes on the outer rim went poorly. A Klaxian patrol group encountered a Void Devourer scout force and engaged. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, there were no Klaxian survivors, and the Void Devourer ships continued onward without even slowing down. Analysis of the battle records showed something terrifying. The Void Devourer's ships had adapted to Klaxian weapons after the first few hits. Energy shields recalibrated to deflect plasma bursts. Hull plating shifted molecular structure to resist kinetic impacts. By the end of the engagement, Klaxian weapons were practically useless. They learn, High Coordinator Vest told the Coalition Military Council. Just like the old records said, we can't rely on any single weapon type. We need diversity, overwhelming force, and tactics that keep changing faster than they can adapt. This led to massive reorganization of the fleet composition. Battle groups were restructured to include multiple species with different weapon technologies. The hope was that by the time the Void Devourers adapted to one species' weapons, another species would already be hitting them with something completely different. It was a sound strategy, but it also meant more complexity, more coordination required, and more ways for things to go wrong. Through it all, no one paid much attention to what Earth was doing. 2 months before the scheduled fleet assembly at the Kepler Nexus, Ambassador Chen sent a brief message to Coalition Command. Construction proceeding on schedule. The Perseverance will be ready. The Perseverance. That was apparently the name of humanity's single ship. Some communications officer filed the name in the official registry and went back to more important work. Admiral Kessitar saw the notification and felt that nagging doubt again. Why were they so confident? What could one ship possibly do that would make any difference? He pulled up intelligence reports on human military capabilities. They had approximately 200 functional warships in their navy, most of them small patrol vessels and frigates. They had 3 larger capital ships, crude things by galactic standards but respectable for such a young species. Any one of those capital ships would have been a reasonable contribution to the Coalition fleet, so why were they only sending one vessel? And what was the Perseverance? The name didn't appear in any registry of existing human ships. Kessitar opened a private communication channel to Ambassador Chen. Ambassador, this is Admiral Kessitar. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Chen's face appeared on the display. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. Admiral, how can I help you? I wanted to discuss Earth's contribution to the fleet. I've been reviewing your military assets, and I see you have several vessels that would be valuable additions to our forces. Would you reconsider sending more than one ship? No, Admiral. One ship is sufficient. Ambassador Chen, I'm going to be blunt. I've seen the projections. I know what's coming. I don't want to see humans die needlessly. Your one ship, whatever it is, won't survive the first wave of the battle. If you care about your crew, you'll reconsider this decision. Chen was quiet for a moment, studying his crystalline form through the communication link. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. I appreciate your concern, Admiral, truly, but we know what we're doing. Do you? Have you ever faced anything like the Void Devourers? No, but we've studied the records. We know what they're capable of. Then you know they're essentially unbeatable. The only reason we have a chance is because we're bringing overwhelming force. Numbers, Ambassador. That's our only advantage. And you're sending one ship. The Perseverance isn't just any ship, Admiral. Then what is it? Chen smiled slightly. You'll see in 2 months. I promise it will be worth the wait. The communication ended, leaving Kessitar more frustrated than before. He filed a recommendation with Coalition Command that human forces be placed in the rear support area, far from the main combat zone. It was the least he could do to protect them from their own foolishness. As weeks passed and the assembly date approached, the mockery of Earth's contribution became less amusing and more concerning. Species that initially laughed began to express genuine anger that humans weren't taking the threat seriously. Some called for Earth to be sanctioned or expelled from the Coalition after the crisis ended. The Kepler Nexus was a site that would be remembered in galactic history forever. 3 star systems arranged in a triangular formation, their gravitational fields creating a stable region of space, large enough to hold the entire Coalition fleet. Ships filled the void between the stars like a swarm of metallic insects, their running lights creating a constellation of artificial stars. Admiral Kessitar stood on the observation deck of his flagship, the Crystal Throne, and surveyed the assembled armada with satisfaction. Over 7,000 capital ships, 50,000 support vessels, fighter craft and drones too numerous to count. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The Thylorian crystal battleships formed a glittering wall of geometric precision, each ship grown from a single massive crystal and equipped with beam weapons that could slice through planetary crusts. The Zephyrian bioships pulsed with organic light, living vessels that breathed and fed and fought with the ferocity of predators. The architect fortress worlds hung in space like artificial moons, their surfaces bristling with enough weapons to sterilize entire solar systems. Dozens of other species added their strength to the fleet. Calaxian hive ships coordinated swarms of smaller craft with perfect precision. Lumen warrior forms flickered in and out of physical existence, beings of pure energy held together by force fields. Deep-borne pressure domes created localized gravity wells that could trap enemy vessels like insects in amber. It was, without question, the most powerful military force ever assembled in known galactic history. Kester allowed himself a moment of hope. Maybe they really could defeat the Void Devourers. Maybe this time would be different. "Sir, final fleet positions are being locked in," his tactical officer reported. "All vessels are reporting ready status." "Excellent. And the humans?" "No sign of them yet, sir." Kestar's form flickered with annoyance. The assembly deadline was in less than an hour. Leave it to the humans to be laid on top of everything else. He turned to his communications officer. "Have we had any contact from Ambassador Chen?" "Yes, sir. She sent a message 2 hours ago. Said they were on approach and would arrive on schedule." "Where are they coming from?" "Coordinates indicate they're approaching from galactic north outside the system plane." That was an odd approach vector, but Kessitar didn't have time to worry about it. He had final preparations to oversee, last-minute tactical adjustments to approve, and enough stress to crystallize his internal structure permanently. Throughout the fleet, crews made final preparations. Weapon systems were tested and retested. Shield generators cycled through diagnostic routines. Fighters launched and relaunched in practice formations. Everyone knew what was coming. The Void Devourers would arrive in less than 3 days. This was their last chance to ready themselves. In the Zephyrian section of the fleet, High Coordinator Vess interfaced with her hive ship's neural network, feeling the collective consciousness of millions of crew members. They were afraid but determined. The bioships themselves, living creatures modified and enhanced over centuries of genetic engineering, hummed with anticipation of battle. "Have the humans arrived?" she asked through the network. "Not yet," came the response from dozens of minds simultaneously. "Sensors show no human vessels in the system." Vess felt irritation pulse through the network. Typical humans. They made such a production about sending their one ship, and now they couldn't even arrive on time. Then something changed. It started with the sensor operators noticing anomalies. Space itself seemed to be distorting along the northern approach vector. Gravitational readings spiked without any visible source. Energy signatures that didn't match any known drive system began registering on detection grids. "What is that?" someone asked over the open communication channels. More ships began noticing the distortion. It was growing, spreading. A ripple in the fabric of space that looked like heat shimmer made visible. Except this was vacuum, where no such thing should exist. On the crystal throne, Kessitar's sensor officer spoke with confusion in his voice. "Sir, we're getting readings that don't make sense. There's something coming from galactic north, but the computer can't calculate its mass properly." "What do you mean it can't calculate the mass?" "The sensors keep giving different readings. 1 second it says 50,000 tons, the next it says 5 million tons, then back down to almost nothing. The mass signature is fluctuating impossibly." Kestar moved to the sensor display and studied the data himself. His officer was right, the readings made no sense. It was as if something was bending the rules of physics around itself, making accurate measurement impossible. Could it be a Void Devourer ship? Some kind of advanced scout? No, sir. The energy signature is completely different. This is something else. Throughout the fleet, ships began adjusting their sensor arrays to focus on the distortion. Thousands of the most advanced detection systems in the galaxy all pointed at the same region of space, trying to understand what they were seeing. The distortion grew larger. Space seemed to fold around itself, creating impossible geometries that made experienced navigators feel dizzy just looking at them. Energy readings climbed higher and higher, reaching levels that should have been impossible for anything short of a stellar event. Then the distortion cleared, and the human ship appeared. For several long seconds, the entire Coalition fleet was absolutely silent. Every communication channel went dead. Every tactical discussion stopped mid-sentence. Thousands of different species with different biologies and different ways of perceiving reality all shared the same reaction. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. The ship was massive. Not just large, massive beyond anything they had imagined. It dwarfed the Architect Fortress worlds. It made the largest Thylorian battleships look like children's toys. Its hull stretched beyond visual range even with enhanced sensors. The scale was difficult to comprehend, as if someone had taken a small moon and shaped it into a warship. But size wasn't the most shocking thing. The ship's design was clearly human. The aesthetic was unmistakable, with the angular lines and practical geometry that characterized human engineering. But incorporated into that design were elements from dozens of different species' technologies, seamlessly integrated in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Kessitar saw Thylorian crystal matrices embedded in the hull, but they were arranged in configurations his people had never considered. Zephyrian biointegration was visible in organic sections of the armor, living metal that pulsed with inner light. Architect dimensional engineering seemed to give the ship impossible depth, as if it existed partially in folded space. And those were just the technologies he could identify. Parts of the ship seemed to phase in and out of normal space. Weapon systems emerged from angles that geometry said couldn't exist. Energy fields surrounded the vessel in patterns that violated thermodynamic principles. The ship didn't just break the rules of physics, it seemed to operate under completely different ones. What? Kestar's voice trailed off. For the first time in his 300-year military career, he was completely at a loss for words. His sensor officer was frantically working his console. "Sir, I'm trying to get accurate readings, but the ship it's interfering with our sensors just by existing. The hull is reflecting and absorbing scanning beams in ways that shouldn't be possible. I can't even tell you exactly how big it is." Throughout the fleet, similar reports came flooding in. Every species' sensors were giving different readings. The Zephyrians' biosensors detected the ship as a living organism. The Lumen's energy readers showed it as pure condensed light. The Architect's dimensional scanners suggested it existed in 7 different spatial dimensions simultaneously. Everyone saw something different, yet everyone saw the same impossible vessel. Slowly, communications began to resume, first as scattered whispers, then growing to a steady hum of confused and awed voices. "Is that really just one ship? How did they build something that size? Those energy readings can't be right. Nothing generates that much power. Are those Thylorian crystals in the hull? How did humans get access to our technology?" On the Zephyrian flagship, High Coordinator Vess felt her hive mind's neural network buzzing with a level of confusion and shock she had never experienced. They literally could not process what they were seeing. The collective intelligence of millions of minds was failing to comprehend the vessel before them. Admiral Kessitar finally found his voice again. "Get me Ambassador Chen, now." It took a moment for the communication to connect. When Chen's face appeared on the display, she had a slight smile on her face that Kessitar wanted to find infuriating but couldn't, because he was still too stunned. "Good morning, Admiral," Chen said pleasantly. "I hope we're not late. We encountered some minor calibration issues with the faster-than-light systems." Kessitar gestured at his view screen, which showed the impossible ship floating in space like a monument to everything he thought he understood about engineering. "Ambassador Chen? What is that thing?" "That's the Perseverance, Admiral. Our contribution to the Coalition fleet." She glanced at something off-screen. "She's fully operational and ready for combat. Where would you like us to take position?" "Where would I—" Kessitar stopped himself, trying to regain his composure. "Ambassador, that ship is impossible." They came like a plague of geometric nightmares. The Void Devourers emerged from dark space at the edge of the Kepler Nexus system. Their arrival detected by early warning satellites 12 hours before the fleet's sensors picked them up. The first report sent chills through every command center in the Coalition Armada. There were more of them than projected. Much more. Where intelligence estimates suggested 2,000 to 3,000 vessels, the actual count approached 5,000. Each ship was a perfect geometric form, cubes, spheres, pyramids, and more complex shapes that hurt to look at directly. Their hulls absorbed all light, making them appear as holes cut into the fabric of space itself. They moved in perfect formation, mathematical precision in every maneuver. Admiral Kessitar watched the sensor displays with growing dread. So many. There are so many of them. His tactical officer's crystalline form had gone pale with fear. Sir, at this count our casualty projections rise to 60%. Maybe higher. We might not have enough ships to overwhelm them. We'll have to try. Kessitar activated fleet-wide communications. All vessels, this is Admiral Kessitar. The enemy has arrived in greater numbers than anticipated, but we have no choice. We hold the line here. If we fail, they'll spread throughout the galaxy unopposed. Today we fight not just for our own species, but for every civilization that exists or might exist in the future. Battle positions. Prepare to engage. The Coalition fleet shifted into formation. Thylorian crystal battleships formed the front line, their shields already glowing with stored stellar energy. Zephyrian bioships moved into flanking positions, ready to swarm and harass. Architect fortress worlds anchored the center, their massive gravitational weapons powering up. Behind them, support vessels and supply ships took defensive positions. Medical ships prepared to receive casualties. And far in the rear, following Admiral Kessitar's earlier orders, floated the Perseverance. Sir, the human ship is requesting permission to move to the front line, a communications officer reported. Kessitar's form flickered with irritation. Despite the impressive size and mysterious technology of the Perseverance, he wasn't about to risk it in the initial engagement. Denied, tell them to hold position. But Ambassador Chen's voice came over his personal communication channel a moment later. Admiral, the Perseverance is a combat vessel. We should be in the fight, not sitting in the rear. Ambassador, we still don't know what your ship is fully capable of. I won't risk it until we understand the tactical situation better. Admiral, with respect, we didn't build the Perseverance to sit safely in the back. We built her to fight. Your objection is noted, Ambassador. Now please hold position and let us handle the initial engagement. The communication cut off, and Kessitar felt a twinge of guilt. But he had 7,000 other ships to coordinate, and an enemy that was rapidly closing the distance. The human ship, impressive as it was, would have to wait. The Void Devourers approached without any attempt at communication. Their perfect formation suggested a single unified intelligence, or perhaps multiple intelligences operating in perfect synchronization. They didn't slow as they entered weapon range. They simply opened fire. The first volley hit the Thylorian front line like a hammer blow. Energy weapons that twisted space itself carved through crystal shields. Matter disruption beams turned solid hulls into expanding clouds of atoms, and worst of all, the Coalition's return fire seemed to have minimal effect. Shields are adapting. A Thylorian captain screamed over the communication network. They're learning from each hit. It was just like the old records described. The Void Devourer's ships changed and evolved in real time. A Thylorian beam weapon would slice through a hull on the first shot. The second shot would penetrate less deeply. By the third shot, it would splash harmlessly across adapted shielding. Admiral Kessitar watched his careful battle plans fall apart within the first 5 minutes. All ships rotate weapon types. Don't give them time to adapt. Zephyrian forces begin flanking maneuvers. Architect fortress worlds fire gravitational weapons at coordinates I'm sending now. The Coalition fleet was disciplined and well-trained. They adapted quickly to the situation, constantly switching weapon types and attack vectors. But the Void Devourers were faster. For every adjustment the Coalition made, the enemy countered with frightening efficiency. A Klaxian hive ship exploded in a ball of superheated plasma. 3 Thylorian battleships lost power simultaneously, their crystalline hulls suddenly inert and dark. A Zephyrian bioship screamed across communication channels as its living hull was infected with some kind of technological virus that turned it against its own fleet. We're losing ships too fast, Kessitar's tactical officer reported, his voice breaking with stress. At this rate, we won't last more than an hour. Kessitar's mind raced through possibilities. They needed something unexpected, something the Void Devourers hadn't seen before. His eyes fell on the sensor display showing the Perseverance, still holding position in the rear. Before he could make a decision, Ambassador Chen's voice came over the command channel again. But this time she wasn't asking permission. Admiral Kessitar, the Perseverance is moving to engage. We can't sit back and watch this fleet be destroyed. Ambassador, I did not authorize— I know, Admiral, but authorization isn't required. We're part of this coalition, and we're going to fight whether you want us to or not. On the tactical display, the massive human ship began to move. And when it moved, it did so in ways that made every sensor operator question their instruments. The Perseverance didn't accelerate gradually like normal ships. It simply stopped being in one location and started being in another, as if it had skipped over the space between. Reality seemed to bend around its hull, creating distortion waves that rippled outward through the fleet. "What kind of drive system is that?" Kester breathed. "Unknown, sir. Our sensors can't track its movement properly. It's like watching something move through a different dimension and only catching glimpses of it in ours." The Perseverance moved from the rear of the fleet to the front line in what should have been impossible time. As it passed Coalition ships, crew members reported feeling strange sensations, momentary disorientation, the sense of being in two places at once, visual distortions that made their eyes water. Then the human ship reached the combat zone, and everything changed. The Perseverance opened fire with weapons that defied classification. Energy beams emerged from angles that shouldn't exist, striking Void Devourer ships from directions that geometry said were impossible. Kinetic projectiles appeared inside enemy hulls without passing through the space between. Entire sections of Void Devourer formations simply vanished, erased from existence by weapons that operated on principles no one understood. Most incredibly, the Void Devourers couldn't adapt. Their ships tried. Hulls shifted and changed, shields recalibrated, defense systems evolved, but the Perseverance's weapons changed faster. Every shot was different from the last. Every attack used a different principle, a different mechanism, a different approach. The enemy couldn't learn fast enough because there was no pattern to learn. How is this possible? High Coordinator Vess asked over the command channel, her voice filled with wonder and confusion. Kessitar had no answer. He could only watch as the massive human ship carved through Void Devourer formations like a blade through smoke. Where it moved, enemy ships died or fled. Its shields didn't just block incoming fire, they seemed to redirect it, sending Void Devourer weapons back at their own vessels. But the sheer numbers were still overwhelming. For every enemy ship the Perseverance destroyed, 3 more took its place. The Void Devourers were learning, adapting their tactics if not their technology. They began focusing fire on the human vessel from multiple directions simultaneously. The Perseverance shuddered under the combined assault. Parts of its hull flickered, phasing in and out of normal space. Energy readings spiked and dropped erratically. For a moment it looked like even this impossible ship might fall. Then it did. Something that made every sensor operator in the Coalition fleet believe their instruments had completely failed. The Perseverance split apart. Not exploded, split, deliberately. The massive vessel separated into 7 distinct sections, each one functioning as an independent ship. But these weren't fragments. Each section was itself a complete warship, smaller than the whole but still larger than most Coalition capital ships, and they didn't stay separate. The 7 sections moved independently, attacking from 7 different vectors simultaneously. Then they recombined into different configurations. 3 sections merged into one massive weapon platform. 4 sections formed a defensive screen. They split and reformed and reorganized in patterns that made 3-dimensional thinking inadequate. "They're fighting in 4 dimensions," the architect representative said over the command channel, his voice filled with awe. "Maybe 5. I can barely track what they're doing." The tide of battle began to turn. With the Perseverance unleashed, the Coalition fleet rallied. Inspired by the impossible ship fighting alongside them, Thylorian captains pressed forward. Zephyrian bioships coordinated with the Perseverance's movements, creating devastating combined attacks. The silence after the battle was almost louder than the combat had been. The Void Devourers fled into dark space, their remaining ships scattering in a disorganized retreat that was completely unlike their usual precise formations. They left behind debris fields, damaged vessels, and something unprecedented in the ancient records, clear evidence of panic. Admiral Kessitar stood on the observation deck of the Crystal Throne, watching the Perseverance reform into its unified configuration. The massive human ship floated peacefully among the Coalition fleet, its hull still glowing faintly with residual energy from the weapon it had absorbed and redirected. Around it, Coalition vessels maintained a respectful distance, as if afraid to get too close to something so far beyond their understanding. "Casualty report," Kessitar said quietly. His tactical officer's voice was subdued. 217 ships destroyed, 493 damaged but operational. Crew casualties estimated at 80,000 dead, 200,000 wounded. It was terrible, but it wasn't the 60% losses they'd projected. It wasn't the complete annihilation they'd been facing before the Perseverance entered the fight. The human ship had saved them. There was no other way to describe it. And the Perseverance? No damage detected, sir. At least none that our sensors can identify. The ship appears to be operating at full capacity. Kestar's crystalline form flickered through several colors as he processed the emotions flowing through him. Relief, gratitude, wonder. And underneath it all, a profound sense of having witnessed something that changed everything he thought he knew about reality. Open a channel to Ambassador Chen. When the communication connected, Chen appeared on the screen looking tired but satisfied. Behind her, Kessitar could see the interior of the Perseverance's bridge, a space that seemed to exist in more dimensions than his eyes could properly process, with control stations that phased in and out of normal space. "Admiral," Chen said with a slight nod. "Hell of a battle." "Ambassador." Kessitar paused, trying to find the right words. "Your ship just changed everything. You understand that, don't you? Nothing in the galaxy will ever be the same after today." Chen smiled slightly. "That tends to happen when you refuse to accept the word impossible. I need to understand. I need to know how you did this. How did humans in just 30 years advance so far beyond what species with thousands of years of development have achieved?" Chen leaned back in her chair, glancing at something off-screen before returning her attention to Kessitar. "Because we approached the problem differently, Admiral. When we joined the Coalition and started learning about all these amazing technologies, Thylorian crystals, Zephyrian biointegration, architect dimensional engineering, you know what our scientists said? What? They said, why did they stop there? Every species we met had reached a certain level of advancement and then plateaued. You developed incredible technologies, but then you decided those technologies were complete, finished, perfect. You stopped asking what came next." Kestar's form shifted uncomfortably. "Because we reached the limits of what was possible." "No," Chen said firmly. "You reached the limits of what you believed was possible. There's a difference. Humans look at limits as challenges, not boundaries. When your people said Thylorian crystals could only be arranged in certain configurations, our engineers asked why. When we discovered it was because other configurations were mathematically impossible, we asked what would happen if we changed the mathematics. You can't just change mathematics. It's universal, is it? Or is it just the best description we've found so far for how reality works?" Chen gestured behind her at the impossible interior of her ship. "The Perseverance exists because we refused to accept that impossibility meant the same thing as really difficult. We took every piece of technology we learned about from the Coalition and asked the same question. What's the next level? What happens if we push this just a little further, but the technologies you've integrated shouldn't work together? Thylorian crystal matrices operate on completely different principles than Zephyrian biosystems. Mixing them should create catastrophic feedback loops. Should, according to conventional understanding. But what if conventional understanding is incomplete? What if there's a deeper level of physics that unifies all these seemingly incompatible systems?" Chen's expression became more serious. "That's what humans do, Admiral. We find connections that others miss. We see patterns that aren't obvious. And most importantly, we never ever accept that something can't be done just because no one has done it before." Throughout the Coalition fleet, similar conversations were happening. Species that had mocked humanity's contribution now scrambled to understand what they'd witnessed. Scientists demanded access to the Perseverance for study. Military commanders wanted to know if more ships like it could be built. Politicians debated what humanity's new capabilities meant for the balance of power in the galaxy. On the Zephyrian flagship, High Coordinator Vess interfaced with her hive minds, trying to process the battle through their collective intelligence. The bioships had recorded everything, storing memories in their organic neural networks. When the hive minds analyzed those memories, they came to a startling conclusion. The human ship was holding back, Vess said to her command staff. Even with all that power, even with all those impossible weapons, it wasn't fighting at full capacity. "How can you tell?" one of her officers asked. "Because the Perseverance only absorbed one major energy blast during the battle. Its systems are clearly designed to convert enemy attacks into power for its own weapons. But it only demonstrated that capability once, almost as a proof of concept. If it had wanted to, it could have absorbed energy from every weapon, fired at it, and become exponentially more powerful as the battle progressed. The implications of that realization spread through the Zephyrian neural network like ripples through water. The humans had saved the fleet while barely using their ship's full potential. What could the Perseverance do if it really tried? What other capabilities had they not demonstrated? And most unsettling of all, why had they held back? The answer came 3 days later, during the Coalition Council meeting to discuss the battle and plan for potential Void Devourer return. Ambassador Chen stood before the assembled representatives and spoke plainly. The Perseverance was designed with one goal: protect the Coalition and demonstrate that humanity deserves its place among you. But we know what you're all thinking. You're wondering if we're a threat now. You're questioning whether we've become too powerful too quickly. You're debating whether to try to contain us or limit our technological development. The chamber was silent. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably, but no one denied her words. Here's what I want you to understand, Chen continued. We could have built multiple ships like the Perseverance. We had the resources and the knowledge, but we chose to build only one. Do you know why? Admiral Kessitar, attending the meeting in person, spoke up. To avoid appearing threatening? No, Admiral. Because we don't want to be the galaxy's protectors. We don't want to be the dominant military power. We don't want other species dependent on us or afraid of us. Chen's expression was earnest. We built one ship to prove we could, to show that when humanity commits to something, we achieve it. But we stopped at one because we believe in the Coalition. We believe in cooperation, not domination. She paused, looking around the chamber at the dozens of different species represented. Yes, we can build things that seem impossible to you. Yes, we can advance technology in ways you haven't imagined. But that doesn't mean we should build an unstoppable armada. The whole point of the Coalition is that we're stronger together, each species contributing their unique strengths. Humanity's strength is innovation, and the refusal to accept limitations. Your strengths are wisdom, experience, and technologies refined over millennia. Together, we're better than any of us could be alone. Constructor Prime of the Architects rumbled. But surely you see the strategic advantage you now hold. With more ships like the Perseverance, you could dominate the entire galaxy. We could, Chen agreed. But why would we want to? Domination isn't progress. It's stagnation disguised as success. If humanity controlled everything, who would push us to be better? Who would challenge our assumptions? Who would show us the things we're missing? Because we're too focused on what we believe is possible. She gestured at the assembled representatives. Every species here has something unique, something valuable. The Thylorians taught us about energy manipulation through crystalline structures. The Zephyrians showed us how technology and biology could merge. The Architects demonstrated dimensional engineering. Dozens of other species contributed insights that made the Perseverance possible. We built something impossible by learning from all of you. So what happens now? High Coordinator Vess asked. The Void Devourers retreated, but they might return. Will one ship be enough if they come back with greater numbers? Chen smiled. If they come back, we'll deal with them. But in the meantime, humanity has a different proposal. We want to share what we've learned. Not the complete designs of the Perseverance, that would be irresponsible. But the principles behind it, the mathematics that let us integrate incompatible systems.